I think the iPhone XR is the best iPhone of 2018. I'm going to tell you why. When I first heard rumors about the iPhone XR in 2018, early 2018, I was very against the idea. Apple had screwed up cheap phones already once with the iPhone 5C. They kind of redeemed themselves with the iPhone SE, but that wasn't really that inexpensive, and it was a completely different product line. It wasn't launched at the same time as the normal iPhone lineup. So the iPhone that was the iPhone XR before we knew the name, it was going to be the cheap iPhone alongside the two new premium iPhones, which were the $1,000 ones. Now, this was a scary thought for me because I didn't want the lineup to be confusing, like have too many options, not be good. And cheap iPhones, they don't have a history of doing so well. But when the XR was announced on stage, I was taken back. The one thing that struck out to me the most was that this didn't look like a cheap iPhone. It shared Face ID with the iPhone XS and X. It shared the same primary camera. It shared the same processor. So performance-wise, camera-wise, and even for the most part, the experience was going to be very similar whether you spent $750 or $1,000. So that was a very interesting proposition to me, and I thought that this phone was going to be a very well-received phone, for the lack of better words. I thought people were going to really take to it and think that Apple was finally doing something right. However, I can never be right about these things because the internet had a field day with the XR, and it was for one main reason. It was because of its display. So this display, the iPhone XR's display, is not a 1080p, a full HD, or FHD as they call it, display. It's a step down, so people like to say it's a 720p display, but technically that's not the truth. It's a little bit higher than 720 at 828p, but getting into the numbers of it doesn't make sense because this phone is not about specs. It's not about the numbers. It's about the end experience. And that's what every Apple product has ever been from the beginning. They don't care about specs. They care about how it translates when you use the phone. And the reality was that a lot of people seem to not understand was resolution is just one piece of the puzzle. Similar to cameras, just because your camera has higher megapixels doesn't make it a better camera. It doesn't mean that your photos are going to instantly look clearer or better. The thing with displays is very similar. Just because you have a higher resolution doesn't mean your quality is going to be good or that the colors are going to look good. And sadly, this is where people got lost. They just got hyper-focused on that resolution and they couldn't see past it. But in reality, the iPhone XR has a very good display for what it is. It's an LCD display, and it gets the job done just fine. If you're coming from an iPhone 8 Plus, it's the same PPI, pixel per inch, which is the metric that really matters in situations like this. So that your clarity is gonna look the same. The resolution, really, you can't count pixels on the screen anyway. And speaking of the display, I think another very interesting thing was that instead of keeping bezels like they had with the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus and having the 10 be the completely new looking phone, this year around, they made every single iPhone look the same, at least from the front. They all had the same notch. They all had a display that went all the way around to the front, and it looked really good. Now, they look very similar as well, so if somebody saw you using this phone, they're just going to think you have an iPhone 10. If you have a 10, 10R, 10S, 10S Max, that's a different story. People probably won't ask. People probably won't care. And that's where I think that this phone really got into the right positioning, because now it doesn't feel like a cheap iPhone, it doesn't look like a cheap iPhone, and the more expensive iPhones don't look any different from it. So you're giving people a lot of incentive to buy this one instead of the more expensive one, and that's exactly what they did. Because if you look at the sales numbers, Apple has been killing it with the XR. They have it's been the most popular smartphone ever since it came out, and it's for good reason. It's an excellent phone. So back in December, when people were really getting into it, people were still upset about it, I wanted to play devil's advocate and be like, no, this is a good phone and I'm going to prove it to you. So what I did was, even though I was using the XS Max, I bought a XR and I started using the XR instead of the XS Max. Now, I'm not going to lie, yes, I did notice that the display was not as good. I've been using an AMOLED display for a year. I've used AMOLED displays on Android phones for years before that. So I knew what an OLED display looked like, and I knew the differences And I'm not the knowledge I have and the experience I have is not applicable to most people. Most people don't know what an AMOLED is. Most people don't know what an LCD is. All they look at is a display, and if it's clean and clear enough, that's all they care. They don't care what resolution it is. They don't care what colors or the contrast. They just want it to look good. It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you do. And that's exactly what the XR did. And I wanted to play devil's advocate there. I wanted to go out and be like, no, I'm going to use this phone and make a point about it, even if I know that the display is not going to be as good as the XS Max. And truthfully, after I started using it, I didn't really miss the AMOLED screen. I definitely noticed it was missing, but it wasn't something that ruined my experience. It didn't really even change it too much. The only places where you'd really notice is if you're watching something that was darker content. There are some TV shows that are filmed in a more darker style nowadays, so those are really fun to watch on AMOLED displays, but most apps don't have a pure dark mode anyway, so it wasn't really that necessary, nor was it that helpful. But aside from that, really the experience didn't change. The telephoto lens being missing, I missed it probably 2 times in the entire time I've been using this phone, but I can live without it. For $250 cheaper, that's a compromise I can make, and I think that's a compromise most people decided to make when it came to the iPhone XR. The iPhone XR is a good phone, and it always has been, and the significance it has is very important as well. This phone is going to signify in history where Apple finally said, let's stop making more expensive phones. Let's try focusing on the more affordable. I mean, it's not affordable for a lot of people, I know. I'm not talking about this, but it is more affordable compared to the XS. So Apple finally said that, and they finally created a phone that wasn't just supposed to be all out, all expensive, best of best. Like, they've learned that there is a give and take here, that people don't care about it. And I think that they partially realized this because of the iPhone 8. In 2018, when the iPhone 10 and the 8 Plus were on sale for the majority of the year, the iPhone 8 was crushing it. The 10 wasn't even on the board, not even the 8 Plus. I'm saying the iPhone 8, the one that people thought was the worst. If you listen to the tech community in the tech world, they would have told you it's the worst iPhone to buy, but most people bought it. It was because it was the cheapest iPhone. It got them into Apple's ecosystem, and it got the job done. That's what the XR is, and that's what, more importantly, the iPhone 11 is, and that's what Apple is going to be from now on. This isn't a cheaper version. This is no longer an alternative. It is the main phone. This is the one people are going to want. And then the XS Max, or their naming scheme is so crazy, by the way, let me just say that. It's going to be the more expensive iPhone. People are not going to refer to this as the cheaper iPhone anymore. They're going to refer to those phones as the more expensive iPhones, which is a very good shift in direction. People shouldn't be forced to buy $1,000 phones. And I think that this is going to show Android competitors that they need to get on their game as well. I'm not saying Android isn't, doing great things, but it's just they're not creating an environment like Apple is. You don't have that ecosystem. You don't have anything besides your price to keep customers in. So going back to me using the iPhone XR, I bought it in December, used it on and off for a little bit, but in March, I decided I could use it as my daily driver, so I gave my XS Max to my dad, and I haven't used it since then. I gave it to him, and that's been it. I've been using the XR for 6 months, and it has been outstanding. The battery life is something that I think that was it. That made the entire thing for me, because it had such good battery life. I could get through a heavy day of usage and still have a little bit left over at night. I could never do that, not even with a XS Max, and that's something that really impressed me. And I'm so happy Apple finally, they're not just making a battery that's good enough, they're paying attention. This is now a battery that can actually stand up to other competitors, and Apple has always been in terms of battery, just not been up there. It's just been an afterthought for them. It's like, this is just whatever. That number didn't matter, but they're also realizing now that people do care about how long their phone lasts, and it's an important factor when you do buy a phone. And as I said, my experience here is definitely not isolated. A lot of people saw this phone and said this is the one for them. In conclusion, the iPhone XR, the best iPhone that came out in 2018, and probably still the best iPhone value-wise you can buy today, even with the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro Max. This is the best value you can get right now, and it's incredible that they still have it around. If they removed it, if this wasn't in the lineup, I still would be happy, because they lowered the price on the iPhone 11 $50, so it's now $700 instead of $750 that the XR started at. And the iPhone XR still lives on at $600, and it's just an amazing lineup. And I think that even through 2019 and 2020, so watch out for this, because this phone is definitely going to keep itself up there on those sales charts. So that's it for this video, guys. I've loved the iPhone XR so far. I still love it, and I would very happily recommend it to anybody, even in 2019. So if you guys are looking for an iPhone and your budget is $700, the XR is a great deal, and I definitely approve of it. But I'm very excited to finally get my hands on the new 11 and 11 Pro Max. So if you guys do want to check out those videos, they'll be out very soon. Subscribe to the channel. I'll have links to those videos when I have them up down in the description as well. And if you haven't already, guys, I would really appreciate it if you followed me on social media. I have all the links down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm going to catch you in the next one.